Hello and welcome to our Credit Chat Live podcast. My name is Christina Roman and I'm the Consumer Education and Advocacy Manager for Experian. Each week, we host a different credit chat topic on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. I'm thrilled to be joined today for our credit chat live by Danielle. She'll be back here for a deeper conversation on this topic. Now, a little bit of background about Danielle. Danielle is a CFP, an MSFP, that's a Master's of Science in Financial Planning, and an enrolled agent, and a founder of Sparks Financial, a fee-only financial planning firm based in Ripon, California. At 25, Danielle's life was transformed when she became a family caregiver for her 88-year-old grandmother who became a wheelchair user after a fall. Through this experience, Danielle recognized the complexities of family caregiving, from making difficult care decisions to managing her well-being. As a former sandwich generation caregiver, she is passionate about helping individuals plan for caregiving, balance their financial well-being during caregiving, and rebuild their lives after caregiving. Now, I'm really thrilled to have Danielle here because when we asked Danielle, she was super enthusiastic about this conversation. And I have to say, Credit Chat is going on its 14th year, and this is the very first year that we've ever talked about long-term care planning. So I love that this is a fresh topic for our audience. We've never had this kind of a conversation, and I'm just so excited to have somebody who's super passionate about it join us today to share her own advice. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that you're emphasizing and spreading awareness on long-term care and caregiving because it's such an important issue that often gets hidden.
Yes, absolutely. Now, if anybody's unfamiliar with long-term care planning can you give a bit of a background on it? What is long-term care planning and what should people really start thinking about?
Yeah, so the simple answer is needing care, needing help. Usually that's with assisting with daily living activities. So that's bathing, eating, dressing, pretty much assisting with your daily living activities.
Okay, so it's the planning for what that's going to look like, where that's going to happen, and how you're going to pay for that, correct?
Yeah, so there's a lot of details that I go into looking at a long-term care plan. Some of those are how to pay for care, who is going to be able to support you, and what does that look like? What does your wishes look like? Because for many of my clients, they don't want to be in the community that no one likes in the community. You know, like it seems like there's a group of older women usually in a community that chit chat. You know, sometimes it's about Medicare one day, sometimes it's about, oh, this is a good deal on the block. And the other days it's the community, the assisted living facility that's terrible, that doesn't help you, that doesn't give you the quality of care you're looking for. And I want to make sure that everybody that I touch, and even the people that are listening today, are able to provide the best care possible for themselves. And that often requires a lot of detail and a lot of pre-planning.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how long-term care planning impacts people financially?
Yeah, it impacts people greatly. Unfortunately, long-term care is extremely expensive. And so often it can leave families in destitute if they're not planning properly.
Can we talk a little bit about what are the potential ramifications if a person or a family doesn't plan for that long-term caregiving?
Yeah, so I often say that someone has to pick up the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And usually that's people who care for you. If you're not able to pay for care, usually friends, family, neighbors are going to be there to pick up the pieces, or you may have no one there to help you. And we don't want you to be in a situation where no one can help you, or you're reliant on families to financially pay for your care or take time off of work or completely quit their jobs to help care for you.
Understandable. So, what are some practical steps that we can take to get ready for our long-term care needs? I want to talk about what are the financial steps that you should take? What should you plan for physically and emotionally when it comes to long-term care planning?
Yeah, so it might be helpful to kind of break it into parts. So the first one is emotionally. That's taking care of your well-being as well as your financial well-being. So that's having an emergency fund in place, having your wishes set out for you, getting the help you need emotionally to make sure that you're in a supportive community that will help you age and grow. A lot of people don't have a community they can rely on for help. And sometimes that means reaching out to community resources, such as senior community nonprofits, to help you through those times, because we don't want you to have to do it alone. The physical, make sure you're getting your wellness checkups. A lot of people forget about those wellness checkups, but they can be the best cost measure to help you in the long run, as well as really make sure that you're preventing any future illnesses that may have not been caught before. And then physically, like I say, apple a day keeps the doctor away. But instead, I'm going to switch it to get daily exercise. Really take care of yourself. The more you take care of yourself, the least likely that you'll need long-term care, or at least reduce your risk of long-term care in the future. And then financially, making sure that you understand your financial circumstances, understanding what your limits are. So even if you're saying, I only have $10,000 in my savings, I can't afford long-term care. If so, have you looked at government benefits? Have you looked to see if you qualify? If you don't qualify, how to get yourself in that position so you can qualify in the future, whether that's spending down or that's moving to another state that is more proactive and has better benefits, and also understanding what you're getting out of the government benefits. So you may have to move out of facilities. You may not have as much flexibility using government benefits, but you may be a person that says, I've saved a lot for my retirement and I'm comfortable. And you may have to look at your circumstances and say, I may have to fork 200,000, 300,000 to get my wishes cared for.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think it's interesting that you brought up retirement. I was just kind of inspired by when you were talking. Can you explain for somebody that is a little bit younger and they're kind of planning for their future and they're thinking retirement kind of lumps all this together. It lumps in the long-term care planning. How is it different? How is planning for retirement different from planning for your long-term care?
Yeah, often when those are grouped and lumped together, often the long-term care, especially the specifics of the long-term care planning, gets missed.
Mm.
And that's unfortunate. Usually when advisors are creating a plan for clients, they're just thinking about the average cost for the wishes that you want. So let's just say you want to age at home. They're going to make estimates based off of your state or national averages to estimate how much it would cost for you to age at home. But they're not considering usually the specifics of what it means to age at home, like home maintenance, especially if you're a person that hasn't repaired their roof or their ACs or hasn't modified their home to age at home. So they haven't put in grab bars, they haven't renovated so that you're not jumping into a tub, instead you have a walk-in shower. So there's a lot of hidden fees that are not accounted for in the long-term care planning. And when those are lumped together into into the retirement planning sector, those little details, those hidden costs, those hidden fees are usually not accounted for.
That's so interesting. And that's honestly why I love having these conversations, because you bring to mind things that I would never have thought about. For example, the walk-in shower, the bars, and the house. Not thinking about that when you're thinking about like, oh, in my retirement, I want to travel, or that's when I'm not working, and you don't think about all of those little details. And so I love the way you broke that up and you shared that difference. So thank you so much for that. Also, one thing you touched on was different states have different benefits when it comes to long-term care planning. So you can move to another state and access those benefits when you're planning out your long-term care needs, or if you're in that situation, are you able to move and access those benefits still?
Yeah, I would read the actual benefits and consult with an elder care attorney to make sure that if you do make that transition, that it's available to you. There's not like a waiting period in between. and actually looking at your documents to see how can you qualify as a resident in that state.
Thank you so much. Now, can we talk a little bit about what are some of the ways that you cover your long-term care costs?
So the way I think about it is in three different sectors. So the first sector is through long-term care insurance. And just like buying car insurance, you're protecting yourself in case you fall, in case you need long-term care in the future, you have a disability or chronic illness that you need assistance with. And the nice thing about long-term care insurance is that you're paying into a system knowing that you will receive some type of benefit. Just like when you get in a car accident, you're hoping in return the car insurance will pay for your car expenses, whatever damage during that process. So there's a lot of security and stability in getting a long-term care insurance policy because you have guaranteed money available to you as long as you continue to pay the premiums. Then you have another sector, and that's paying out of pocket. So that can be your income sources, so your investment income, that could be your savings, that could be your rental income, you're withdrawing from your income or your savings to pay for long-term care. But the unfortunate part of that is if you haven't prepared properly, it's very likely that your long-term care costs are going to be much more expensive than your probable income for the year. So, for example, in-home care costs may cost up to $250,000 or more in California, for example. And so that's much more than many people have in income. And so they draw from savings, and then they have tax implications because they're gaining income from pulling from savings. So there's risk in doing that if you're not preparing properly. And that's why the long-term care insurance is, even though I don't sell it, so I'm not trying to try to sway one or another. I'm just saying if the long-term care insurance, you don't have to worry about taxes associated with needing care. You're receiving that benefit as long as you've met up to a certain time frame and you meet the qualifications to receive the benefit. Whereas then the third sector is the government benefits. So the government benefits are dependable depending on where you live, so which state you live in, and those benefits. Usually those are for people who are impoverished, who have a very low income and low asset level. Except for the exception of California, which doesn't have an asset limit, only has an income limit. So that's what I was saying, each state is a little bit different in how they go about their Medicaid policies. And that's why it's really important to get an elder care attorney who understands your benefits of your state that you're living in so that you can plan accordingly.
All super important information. Thank you so much. Can we talk about somebody that may be watching this and they may be saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to plan for this? Can we talk about any strategies for keeping long-term care costs down or at least minimizing them as much as you can?
Yeah, so it's difficult, but I've found some creative ways that are not perfect, but will help to minimize your costs. The first thing, as we talked about, is taking care of your health. The lower risk that you can take on your physical health, the better. Unfortunately, just some people fall, some people get in car crashes. Long-term care is inevitable. But if you can take care of your health as much as possible, you're reducing your risk. The second thing is relying on community resources. So if you know someone in your community or a nonprofit in your community that is willing to help, like Meals on Wheels, loaner equipment, there's medical equipment loaner programs where they loan medical equipment to you so that you don't have to pay anything for medical equipment. There's just using what's in front of you. For my grandma, for example, we had neighbors pick up her mail and walk her dog and take out the trash. We just got really lucky. And then when she was in the hospital, they did a meal chain and delivered her meals. And so we really tried to maximize the resources we had close to us in order to minimize as much cost as possible.
Very interesting. Thank you. Those tips were fantastic. Now, for families that might feel unprepared financially, what advice or resources could help them manage their long-term care planning?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say, communication with your loved ones, communication with family. For example, my husband and I are only children. So it's kind of, we're the default family caregivers for them. So in a way, we're expected to fill that role in some capacity or another because that's all they have. And if that was the case for someone who was unprepared and had very little assets, I would want them to come to me and say, like, this is the situation that we're running into. This is our financial circumstances. Unfortunately, due to the high cost of long-term care, we will not be able to pay for long-term care for this period. um, would you be willing to caregive for us? Or what are some ways that you can support us? Keeping that open communication so that when a fall happens, when a disease happens, when an illness happens, that at least the family is prepared for that to happen. At least mentally and emotionally is somewhat prepared, may not be financially, but at least they know that this is the responsibility that they may have. And then the second thing is reach out to your resources. So we talked about um, cost and how to minimize cost, utilizing maybe adult daycare centers during the day and having a family member take care of you during the night in just hopes that you don't wake up during the night and need care, that you sleep through the night. Having some type of minimizing strategies can help support that. So you're not having someone fully bear the whole load for the entire time of caregiving. I would also say contact an elder care attorney or an expert that understands your Medicaid policies of your state, as I talked about before, so that you can understand what your possibilities and options are. And it might need a financial advisor to understand if you don't already know your financial circumstances. Talking with a financial advisor can see how you can minimizing strategies as well as see what your financial roadmap looks like.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times looking for an attorney that specializes in elder care. Where do you go to find this type of a resource?
Yeah, so the best way is my best friend Google. It is to look up elder care attorneys in your area. From what I know, there's not like a directory.
Okay.
Um, it's more of referral in Googling your local area. There are some nonprofits that provide legal services. So if you need low cost or free services, you may want to look into like legal services within your area, nonprofits that can support you.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to, because sometimes you may see an ad, you don't know if a person is reputable or if they're going to have your best interest in mind. So I just want to make sure, especially for elder care, you want to make sure that you're working with somebody that is going to have your best interest in mind. And so I was just wondering if there's anything that people should look for when they do seek out these resources, anything that you recommend.
Yeah, so some questions I would ask is what experiences have they worked with other clients? How much do they charge per hour? It might be $400 to $500 per hour. See what needs to be done and kind of disintegrate or decipher what things are most important on your list. You may have parents that, or you yourself, have never created a estate plan before. And so there may be things that are really important to do right now, and there may be things that can be done later that are not as important. So, kind of deciphering what is useful now and what can be used later.
Mm-hmm. And then one other thing I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned if you know that you're not going to be able to afford specific services or you're not going to be able to have in-home care or afford a facility, you need to talk to somebody, a family member that you trust to potentially care for you. Um, First, I would like for you to share a little bit more about your story. Did your grandmother ever talk to you about the possibility that you may be the person caring for her? Um, if anything happened to her, or was this the situation that you just happened to find yourself in and you kind of just navigated it because you had to?
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation to be kind of thrust into this caregiving role. I had never had a conversation with my grandmother about being her family caregiver. The way I thought about it in my head was she filled my cup multiple times. When my daughter was born, she was the first person I called and asked for help. When my daughter couldn't sleep at night because she was a baby, 4 or 5 week-year-old baby, she was the first one I called to ask for help to put her to sleep. And her response was, she has reverse time zones, was her response. So I felt that because she gave so much to me, was almost like a second parent to me, that I felt like I had to give back to her and care for her. It wasn't something that I had to do. It was a choice I made to care for her and make sure she had the best quality of life for the rest of her life. And a lot of others feel the same way. Of one event happens, just like me, it was a fall or a diagnosis, and they feel like they have to step in and support that person because they cared for them. And no one wants to see the person that they love to be in a situation that's uncomfortable and lonely and isolating. You want to help, and sometimes you're forced into a default caregiver position.
And then how can somebody that does find themselves in this situation, what advice do you have for them to navigate it while still protecting their own financial health?
Yeah, it's really hard. I often say it's best to just protect your financial wellness. So try to stay out of debt. Understand a strategy if you need to dip into savings. So if you're at a point where you're like, I have to dip into savings and I have no other choice, where are you going to get that money from? And have a strategy. I often talk about care agreements or care contracts. That's a contract between you and your loved one where your loved one's paying you a certain amount, or when they pass away, you'll receive like a lump sum from an inheritance to cover some of the costs that you missed by being out of the workforce or having to decrease your amount of hours as in the workforce because you were a caregiver. So kind of mend some of the hardships of caregiving. And then also just making sure that you're taking care of your health as well. As we say in the financial industry, health is wealth. So if you're not getting your annual doctor's checkups as well, if you're not getting the support you need, whether that's through a caregiver support group, whether that's going to therapy, that is what's going to get you through once caregiving is done. Mm-hmm. Then you can rebuild. If you're only right now in a caregiver position and you're only putting $1 towards savings each month, that's sometimes all people can do. And that's okay. Let's create a plan so when caregiving is over, you can rebuild yourself and make sure you're at a level that is satisfactory to you and that can make you whole again.
I love that. That was a wonderful answer. Thank you for sharing that. I want just to end it with what is a tip that you would like to give somebody? What is one final piece of advice you would like to give somebody? People should start planning for this. So what advice would you give for them? And then can you also please share where people could find you? Where can they learn more about you?
Yeah, so my first tip is communication. You can create this elaborate, amazing long-term care plan that is maybe like a stack of books. It's so big and beautiful. But if you haven't communicated with anyone about it, you might as well just throw it in the trash, like a dumpster fire, because it doesn't mean anything if you haven't communicated. So if you haven't told your loved ones that you want to be at home instead of being in an assisted living community, they might put you in the assisted living community. Then your plan just went to trash. Mm-hmm. Or you put together some home modification. Let's say you pre-bought some things to modify your home for aging at home, like grab bars. Maybe you did like anti-slip pads. Maybe you got a stair lift that's been in your attic, ready to be used in your home. If you pre-bought those things but haven't communicated with someone about those things that are available to you, they're just going to rebuy it, or they're just going to be like, this is too tough, and just put you in a assisted living community that you don't want to live in. So,
Mm-hmm.
as I said, communication about your wishes makes things easier for the caregiver down the road. Caregivers have decision fatigue. They're making so many decisions at once, plus they're dealing with grief. Make things easier for them and communicate. The resources that I'll share is that I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and I do a lot of short storytelling in hopes to spread awareness on long-term care and caregiving, and learn from you in your experiences.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Danielle, for sharing this information. Now I know that we can link to you on our blog page after we launch this conversation. So you can look forward to some links where you can connect with Danielle on our blog page. And thank you so much for joining our Experian Credit Chat and today's Credit Chat Live. I look forward to chatting with you a little bit more in the future about specifically caregiving. I know that's something that we said that we wanted to have a conversation about. I would love to figure that out, because I would love to keep this conversation going and keep it top of mind, throughout the year. As I mentioned, this is important information that people need to really start planning for. So I'm always grateful for experts like you who take your time to share this information with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. And you can look for us on Credit Chat every single Wednesday. You can look for our entire schedule of conversations coming up at experian.com/credit chat. Have a wonderful day, everyone.